We have been talking all morning about the fact the deposed president is now in custody in New York. But what happens next in Venezuela?
Well, it's a remarkable turn of events, and I think your question is exactly the correct one. Because what has essentially happened thus far is that Maduro, the sort of lead of this administration, and his wife have been taken into custody. But the rest of the government, and we have to think of Venezuela's government really as more of an organism with different pockets of power and influence and, frankly, interests. The majority of those hardliners are still in power. And it appears that the United States is looking to work with them to implement changes that it deems important. So I think there's a lot of question marks, and of course, much relief for many Venezuelans to see the back of Maduro, but a lot of uncertainty in the days ahead about how this might look and if there are really going to be guarantees for a proper transition.
You talk about uncertainty and transition. Do we have any idea how practically that can happen?
Well, I think this is exactly what we need to be looking for in the coming hours, and there are key indicators we should watch for. For example, who's controlling Venezuela's critical infrastructure? Does the water keep running? Is the electricity still on? What influence do the current office holders maintain in the military, which is a system that has been very loyal to Maduro and to Chavismo as an idea of government for many decades. And I think those are the indicators that we need to look for going forward. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State from the United States, was giving some interviews this morning on the Sunday morning shows and was mentioning, I think, that essentially they're hoping to govern in collaboration with these office holders. And I think that raises a lot of questions, given that their own statements from Caracas have been very defiant about complying with U.S. goals.
There's been mixed reaction to the US's intervention in Venezuela. And while a lot of leaders have been supportive, they've really emphasized, many global leaders, the importance of the will of the Venezuelan people being respected. Are people on the ground worried that that might not be the case?
I think this is a really important point, and I think many Venezuelans will be looking to the United States to lay out sort of a roadmap going forward, what this might look like. Now, on Saturday, a court in Venezuela declared Delcy Rodríguez, who was previously the vice president, as the interim leader. That would likely give her some months legally in Venezuela to continue to hold that office, but then there would theoretically need to be elections. Those are details that I think many Venezuelans are looking to hear. I think more broadly, there have been very interesting reactions in the region here in Latin America. I think that, while very few leaders across the region had recognized Nicolas Maduro's government, he lost an election in 2024 and refused to step down. At the same time, I think they're very concerned about how this was done. And we saw a joint statement today from 6 or 7 countries in the region: Brazil, Mexico, Uruguay, Colombia, Chile, really raising questions about the level of U.S. intervention and what that could mean for the sovereignty of countries in the region.
What are the risks in what is to unfold in the next few days, the next few months, and what are the greatest concerns of those on the ground?
I think one big concern is that this operation could have the unintended effect of essentially entrenching a regime that has been involved in human rights abuses and repression of the opposition for more than a decade. If there is really no substantive change or plan for elections, that is a possibility, and I think one to watch out for. On the flip side, I think that if the current situation is destabilized, if different interests or parts of the government try to take advantage of the situation to consolidate their own control, we could see a very chaotic situation. And that's something clearly that neighboring countries are worried about. Colombia, in the first hours after these attacks, sending reinforcement troops to its more than 2,000-kilometer border with Venezuela and setting up reception centers for migrants in case there were to be an outflow of refugees.
Do we expect that to happen? And how will people on the ground deal with the uncertainty? You talk about stuff like the water supply, the electricity supply. No one knows who's in charge of that. How's that going to run? How are people coping within that uncertainty?
So the good news is that this morning, at least in Caracas, the situation has been very calm and quiet. So that is a good indication. But yesterday, right after this first happened, we saw long lines, for example, at pharmacies and supermarkets as people tried to sort of stock up on basic goods, anticipating potential shocks. We don't know that that will happen, but I think there is clear nervousness on the ground about what that would look like. I really want to emphasize here that this is a situation in Venezuela that is already really on the brink of a humanitarian crisis. Venezuela has been facing very high levels of inflation, and the costs of basic foodstuffs and services and even housing far exceeds the average salary of Venezuelans. So we hear reports, for example, of families having to cut back on the number of meals that they're eating a day, really rationing their supply of food. And so this is a situation for ordinary Venezuelans that is already at a stress point and can't really support a lot more destabilization.